Sachas Gittin Daf Yadav continues Gemara's discussion. Machlekes between the Chachamim and Reb Shimon about a get isha or eved, which is made in a erkois, which is made in a non-Jewish court. So the Gemara has already said, you've seen in our last Mishnah, that all other types of shtarais, everyone agrees, are kosher. In erkois, Gittin Ashim and Shechuri Avadim, that's Machlekes. The Tanna Kama seems to say that they are apostle, and Reb Shimon seems to say that they're kosher. The Mishnah ended off with the last line that said that the only way, which we said that it's a problem, is if they are made in Hedyot. They're not made in non-Jewish courts, but they're made just by non-Jewish laymen. So now the Gemara has said that the Pshat and Reb Shimon, the reason why the get could be kosher even in a non-Jewish court is because we're holding like Rabbi Elazar. It's Eidim Mesir Karti. You don't need signatures at all. The only potential problem is that people may come to rely on the signatures, and that's why we would say it's a problem if the signatures are false. But here we're talking about where they're clearly non-Jewish names, and therefore no one's going to rely on them. So the Gemara says, what's an example of clearly non-Jewish names? So Papa brings a list of names that are clearly names of Avodah Zarah: Hormiz, Avodina, Bar Shibtoi, Bar Kidri, Baati, Nakim, Una. All these, there's no possibility that anybody's going to assume that they're a Jew, and therefore you don't have to appear they're going to rely on them. There's no problem with Mizif Miteichai. That's okay, because Eidim Mesir Karti, all you need is a get, and people who see that it's being given from the husband to the wife. You don't have to have signatures at all. Now, says the Gemara, if that's true, that the only reason that these are okay is because there are no signatures, and the Shemus Muvhakin is because the signatures are not a problem because they're Shemus Muvhakin. So then in the end of the Mishnah where we say that where is the situation in which Rabbi Shimon agrees that there's a problem, we said that that's if it's in a Hedyot court, if it's in a situation where it's laymen, not professional judges. Why do you have to go to there? Why don't you just say, even in a situation of professional judges in a professional court, if the names are not Shemus Muvhakim, if they're not clearly non-Jewish names, then you would have a problem. Because again, we have the problem of Mizif Miteicha, people may come to rely on the Eidim that are signed there. So the Gemara gives two answers. The Gemara's first answer is, what you mean to say is when Rabbi Shimon said it's possible if it's Hedyot, he mean in a situation where it's like Hedyot, not that it's Hedyot itself, but it's like Hedyot. It's like where it's not a professional court. Professional court is acceptable because it's trustworthy that the Eidim are really signed. If it's an unprofessional court, just laymen, you can't trust it because there is no certification. You don't know that they're going to do their job and make sure that they're real. So any other situation where you can't know that it's for real, such as if you had non-Shemus Muvhakim, but you may be concerned that anybody's going to sign on it, then you would have to say that it's no good. That's Gemara's first approach. Gemara's second approach is that the last line is actually not Reb Shimon talking. It's actually the Chachamim talking. And we're going back to the Chachamim. The Chachamim said that any shtar which is made in our kais is kosher, except for Gittin Daf and Shechuri Avadim. Going back on that, any shtar which is kosher is only kosher in professional court. And a layman court, there it's not kosher, is what the Mishnah means to say, because you cannot trust that the signatures are verified if you don't have professional judges there. Okay, now the Gemara quotes a brisa, which brings very another testimony to the Machlokes here. Because the brisa says, Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Yosi said, this is what Reb Shimon said to the Chachamim. Same Machlokes Reb Shimon and the Chachamim. This is what he said in the Tzidon. Said that the generation before us, he had the same Machlokes, Rabbi Akiva and the Chachamim. Meaning it's Reb Shimon, the Chachamim is the second generation. Reb Shimon is the Talmud of Rabbi Akiva. So Rabbi Akiva and the Chachamim argued a generation before them. Says Reb Shimon, the machlokes that they had was not in a professional court at all. It was not was not by regular shtarais, not by Gittin Daf and Shechuri Avadim. In a professional court, there was no argument. Everybody agreed to what I'm saying, that those are all kosher in a professional non-Jewish court. The only machlokes was in a court of in Hedyotes where you had laymen. You did not have professional judges there, even in the Erkais. Rabbi Akiva there was machshir, and the Chachamim apostled. The reason there is that they're arguing over whether you can trust them or you cannot trust a court of laymen. Now, in the case of Gittin Daf and Shechuri Avadim, there says Rabbi Shimon there, everybody agreed, but Rabbi Akiva and the Chachamim agreed that it is kosher because we're not relying on the witnesses anyway, because we're in Rabbi Elazar's opinion, so it's Eidim Mesir Karti, you don't need the witnesses that are signed on it. So that's why there isn't any issue there. So that's the beginning of the brisa. Then the brisa continues, and it says that Rav Shimon ben Gamliel says, even these are kosher in a situation where Yisrael don't sign, where the Goyim do not allow Jews to sign a shtar. So there's no possibility that is a Jew who signed on it. So there's no possibility of anybody ever relying on the signatures that are signed there as a Masira. In a case, however, where Yisrael are allowed to sign, then you could not, because you have to be concerned that people are going to rely on the signatures that are signed as Eidim Masir, and of course, if they're going, then they are not in the parsha of Eidim Masir. So the Gemara asks, why don't you make Gzeira if it's possible in a case where Yisrael are allowed to sign, make Gzeira, possible in a case where they're not allowed to sign, in order that you don't end up trusting them in a case where they are not allowed to sign. So the Gemara says, no one confuses two places. People may confuse two names, but no one is going to confuse two places. And therefore, you don't have to make Gzeira one place to another place. Next, the Gemara says that Ravina once wanted to be machshir, to kasher, to certify a star which was made in a gathering of Arameans, which are hedyotos, they are laymen. So said Rav from Tim, you can't. The only way in which, and this is referring to other shtaris, monetary contracts, the only way which you can be matir those is if they're made in courts, not if they're made amongst laymen. Now we have a Mishnah brought by Rava. Rava says that a Persian shtar, which was given in front of Jewish witnesses, you could use to collect from property, but not from property that has a lien on it, not from property that was sold where you have to take it away from the buyer. The halacha is whenever you want to collect money from somebody who owes it to you, and the guy says, I don't have anything, you can take away the land that he sold. You can take it away from the person who bought it because he sold it in order that you shouldn't be able to collect it. You can take it from him if it was bought after the loan was made. There is a lien on that land, and whoever buys it could lose it. Now, so this Persian shtar you're allowed to collect with. So here, the halacha seems to be that because even though the shtar is written by Persians, because there are Jews who saw it, they, by them witnessing it, are testifying to the validity of the loan, and therefore you could use it to collect the loan. So Gemara asks a few things. Gemara says, first of all, the witnesses, how do they know what it says on the shtar? They're testifying that it was given, but they can't read Persian. So Gemara says we're talking about where they know how to read Persian. So Gemara asks, but a shtar has to be written in non-erasable form, and the Persians wrote using erasable ink. The Gemara says no, where they happen to have used non-erasable ink. The Gemara says, but the halach is that a shtar, a contract has to, in the text of the contract itself, has to repeat the terms, the general facts about the contract, about the agreement, and Persians don't do that. So Gemara says the situation happens to be that it was repeated. So Gemara says, so then you have all the things that qualify for a kosher shtar. Why can you only collect from the property that is still belonging to the person who owes the money, to the person who is the borrower? You should be able to collect even the property that he sold, because you have a valid loan with a contract. What's the issue? The issue is that the purchaser didn't know that he was buying land that was under lien, that was mortgaged to this loan. How was he supposed to know? Generally, we assume he knows because there are Jewish witnesses that sign on the shtar. And the fact that the name is signed on the shtar, that creates a voice, that creates rumors. People talk about that. But here, you don't have any Jews that are signed on the shtar. It doesn't create knowledge, and therefore it's not his fault. He could not have known to be wary not to purchase this land that was mortgaged. Now the Gemara discusses a related child that was asked from Rish Lakish to Bechanan. Rish Lakish asks, what happens if you have people come from Eretz Yisrael, they bring a get, and names signed on the get are names that are not Jewish names, but they could be used by Jews, the kind of names that Jews use, like, I don't know, Morris and Seymour, whatever it is. So the question is, can we rely on these with Eidei Masira? Now, obviously, we can't rely on the Eidei Chasima, because we don't know if they were Jews or not. Can we rely on them with Eidei Masira, or do we have to call this Mazuf Mitaycha? Do we have to say that you can't allow something like that because people may come to rely on the Eidei Chasima in such a case, and we don't know if the Eidei Chasima are Jewish or not? So Rabbi Yechon said the only case we had where we relied on non-Jewish names in a shtar were Lucas and Lewis. As Lucas and Lewis, the Gemara explains, no Jews go by those names, and therefore there is no concern that anybody's going to rely on the Eidei Chasima to be Eidei Masira. So you don't have that problem, and therefore this doesn't solve our question. Well, we don't have any indication that you're allowed to use those names in a situation where you don't know that Jews aren't going to come to rely on it. So this is where we asked the kasha on this from a Brisa. Brisa says if a get comes from Medinas Hayam, and there are witnesses that are signed on it, and their names are non-Jewish names, those documents are kosher, because the majority of Jews in Chutz La'aretz go by non-Jewish names. So how come over there you're allowed to? Why are you afraid that people are going to come to rely on the Eidei Chasima and maybe they are really Akom and you can't rely on them? So Gemara answers, what do you mean? It says the reason. It says because they're most likely, they are Jews even if they're non-Jewish names, because we're following the majority. The majority situation is that even though they're non-Jewish names, they're Jews. Now, the Gemara has another version of this whole exchange. The Gemara says actually the original question that was asked was about a get coming from Medinas Hayam with names on it that could be Jewish names and non-Jewish names, and the answer came from this brisa. The brisa, you clearly see that it's okay because the majority of Jews there use those types of names. Now we get to our next Mishnah. Mishnah discusses a topic we've seen earlier in the Masechta, and that is it considered to be a zchus? Is it considered to be a benefit, for sure, for a woman to receive a divorce and for an eved to receive a document of freedom? Why do we need to know? Because if you make a shliach to accept those things for them, if it's considered to be a benefit for sure, he can do them without their knowledge, and it's chal from the minute he gets it. And then if the owner or the husband wants to take it back, he can't. It's already chal. However, if it's not a benefit, so then if it's at least a mixed bag, not a pure benefit, then ein zachal underside b'fanav. Then the shliach cannot be makabelit for the eved or the isha without specific instructions. Therefore, it's not chal until they actually give it to them. And if the one who gave it, the husband or the master, want to retract and take it back, they can. So you have machlokes between Rav Meir and the Chachamim. As far as Gittin Nashim, everyone agrees that is considered to be not a benefit for them, at least not a pure benefit for them, and therefore it's not chal until she receives it, and the husband can be chayzer as long as he wants, he could retract. And the reason it's not a pure benefit is explained later, because she's losing her funding. As long as she's married to him, he has to feed her and support her. She gets a monetary benefit out of it. That ends when she gets divorced. To take away her support is not something you could say that she definitely wants, and therefore, ein zachan l'adam shlei, ein chavel l'adam shlei b'fanav is considered to be a chayv for her, at least in that respect. Now, as far as the eved, here you have machlokes between Rav Meir and the Chachamim. Rav Meir says it is not a zchus for the eved, and therefore there is something bad about it, and therefore it's not chal, and he could be chayzer. The Chachamim say shechuri avadim zachan l'adam shlei b'fanav. It's a pure benefit for him. It's chal as soon as he receives it, and the master cannot take it back, cannot retract even before it reaches the eved's hand. Now the Mishnah goes further and explains that the woman is obligated, her husband is obligated to support her. So there's no way she could lose her support except by being divorced. Therefore, the divorce makes her lose it, and it's not a benefit. The eved, though, the master could decline to support him if he doesn't want to. He may not be able to make him work at that point, but he can decline to support him. If that's true, so then he's not losing his support. He's not losing his food because he's being set free. He can lose his food anyway. So he's not losing it because he's being set free. The being set free is purely a benefit. That is the Chacham's opinion. Rav says, no, he is losing his food. And therefore, it's not a pure support, and he could still be a chayzer. The Gemara asks, why don't you look at the fact that he's losing his truma? If you want to say that it's a benefit, because you're not worried about the food, but if his owner was a kohen, he could eat truma. When he gets set free, he cannot eat truma. That is definitely a bad thing for him. Why don't we say that that's a chayv? So my answer is no. The only reason he could eat truma was because he's a possession. He's a property, and therefore that makes no difference. Now the Mishnah didn't really explain that too well. The Gemara will explain it. Now begin the Gemara, which goes to a related topic and tries to bring a proof to it from our Mishnah. Gemara relates that Rav Huna and Rav Yitzchak bar Yosef were sitting in front of Rav Yirmiyah. Rav Yirmiyah was the Rebbe, and Rav Yirmiyah was falling asleep. So it was a conversation between Rav Huna and Rav Yitzchak bar Yosef. And they were discussing, are you allowed to be zeicha for one person when it's a problem for somebody else? Are you allowed to, let's say Reuven owes money to Shimon, are you allowed to grab the money for Shimon on his behalf? So you're getting it for Shimon, but you're making Reuven lose. So the Gemara says, it's apparent from our Mishnah, Rav Huna said, it's apparent from our Mishnah that you are allowed to, because the shliach here is taking the freedom for the eved and for the woman away from the husband who wants to retract, away from the master who wants to retract. He wants to hold on to them. And we're saying, no, it's chal, because it's a zchus for the eved, it's a zchus for the isha. Zchus eved, zchus for the isha, great, but what about the one who's losing? Obviously, we're not concerned. If it's a zchus for the one who's getting, you're allowed to do it. So Rav Yitzchak bar Yosef said, would you say that even if there was a second person that Reuven owes money to? If Reuven owes money for Shimon, you're grabbing property for Shimon for his behalf to collect. Now their property is not available for Levi. So you're helping Shimon, you're hurting Reuven, you're also hurting Levi. You say it in a case like that, our implication is that if you want to prove things from our Mishnah, it would seem to be that you can. So the Gemara says this was the discussion that they were having, And Rabbi Yirmiyah woke up from whatever slumber he had, and he said to them as well. He said, "Children can't prove anything from the Mishnah." Rabbi Yechanan said that if somebody grabs for Levi in a situation where Reuven owes money to him, he grabs Reuven's money to give it to Levi. In a case where there is money owed, also he's grabbing from Reuven to give to Shimon, and by doing that, he's not letting Levi collect. It's not allowed because you're hurting Levi, and then you're not allowed to do that. In our Mishnah, you're hurting the husband. It's different because the husband said, "Give this." At the moment he said, "Give this get to my wife, give this get to my Eved," he's setting it in motion. He can no longer say, "Well, it's bad for me." You said, "Give it."